The alarm screamed through the halls of Nexus Prime. Ambassador Veltar ran down the shining corridors, his forearms moving fast as he tried to reach the emergency meeting room. His blue skin was wet with sweat. In all his years working for the Galactic Coalition, he had never heard an alarm like this one. The meeting room was full of panic. Leaders from 12 different worlds sat around a large table made of crystal, their voices mixed together in fear and anger. Veltar took his seat and looked at the big screen on the wall. What he saw made his blood turn cold. The screen showed a map of their galaxy. Red dots marked the outer rim territories. But as Veltar watched, the red dots started to disappear. One by one, star systems went dark. Whole worlds with billions of people just vanished from the map. "How many?" asked General Crix, his voice shaking. The old soldier had fought in 3 wars, but Veltar had never seen him look so scared. 17 systems in the past week, said Dr. Yara, the Coalition's top scientist. Her green tentacles moved nervously as she spoke. We lost contact with all of them. No distress calls, no survivors. Nothing. The room went quiet. 17 systems meant hundreds of billions of lives. Gone. What about our fleets? Asked Ambassador Noth from the mining worlds. Destroyed, General Crix said. Admiral Zephan took the 3rd Fleet to investigate the Kilo system. We got one message before they went dark. He said something was eating his ships. Literally eating them and turning them into something else. On the screen, a new red dot appeared, then faded to black. Another system gone. The reports from the outer rim all say the same thing, Dr. Yara continued. They call it the devouring dark. It arrives without warning. First, the stars dim. Then communication stops. Our scouts who got close enough to see it described something impossible. Ships and planets being consumed by a living darkness. The darkness takes everything and makes it part of itself. Veltar felt sick. How long before it reaches the core? Worlds? At its current speed, 6 months, Dr. Yara said. Maybe less if it keeps getting bigger. The leaders started talking all at once. Some wanted to evacuate the outer worlds. Others said they should build a bigger fleet. A few suggested surrender, though no one knew how to surrender to something that didn't seem to want anything except to consume everything. Silence. General Crix slammed his fist on the table. The crystal rang like a bell. We need solutions, not panic. What about the weapons for Mandara 7? Asked Ambassador Noth. The plasma cannons that can destroy. Moons? Tried them, General Crix said. The 7th Fleet used everything we had, nuclear bombs, plasma weapons, gravity disruptors. Nothing worked. The darkness just absorbed the energy and grew stronger. The ancient archives? Suggested Dr. Yara. Maybe the old civilizations faced something like this before. I checked, said Veltar. The only mention of anything similar was from 1,000,000 years ago. The records are mostly destroyed, but they mention something called the First Hunger. It consumed 3 galaxies before it disappeared. The room fell silent again. 3 galaxies. Trillions upon trillions of lives. There has to be something, whispered Ambassador Noth. Some weapon we haven't tried. Some ally we haven't asked for help. General Crix was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. There is one option. But you're not going to like it. All eyes turned to him. The old general looked older than ever. Protocol 7, he said, Doctor. Yara's tentacles went stiff with shock. You can't be serious. What's Protocol 7? Asked Ambassador Noth. Veltar knew. Every high-ranking coalition member knew, though most hoped they would never hear those words. It's the last resort protocol. When facing complete extinction, we're authorized to use any means necessary to survive. Any means. Including asking the humans for help, General Crix said. The room erupted in voices. Some leaders shouted in anger, others in fear. The humans were members of the coalition, but they were kept at arm's length. Their homeworld Earth was far from the core systems for a reason. The humans are dangerous, said Ambassador Noth. Unpredictable, violent. They think differently than civilized species. That's exactly why we need them, General Crix said. Every weapon we've tried, every strategy we've used, the devouring dark adapted to it instantly. It thinks like us? It knows how we fight, but humans? They don't think like anyone else in the galaxy. And if they refuse to help? Asked Dr. Yara. They won't, Veltar said slowly. Everyone looked at him. I've studied human psychology. They have a strange trait. When faced with impossible odds, when everyone tells them something can't be done, they become more determined to do it. They call it stubbornness. We call it madness, General Crix nodded. But not just any humans. If we're going to do this, we need the most dangerous ones they have. You mean they're military? Asked Ambassador Noth. No, General Crix said. I mean they're criminals, they're psychopaths. The ones they keep locked away because they're too dangerous for normal society? The silence that followed was heavy with fear and disgust. There's a ship, General Crix continued, called Pandora's Box. It's a maximum security prison that floats in space near Earth. They keep their worst criminals there, frozen in sleep because they're too dangerous to execute and too violent to rehabilitate. You want to release human criminals? Dr. Yara's voice was high with shock. I want to unleash the most unpredictable, dangerous, chaotic minds in the galaxy against something that thinks it has us figured out, General Crix said. Because if we don't, we're all going to die anyway. On the screen, another red dot flickered and went dark. Veltar looked around the room at the frightened faces of the galaxy's leaders. All in favor of Protocol 7? One by one, hands and tentacles and claws rose into the air. Some shook with fear, others with anger, but they all rose. I'll send the message to Earth immediately, Veltar said. He stood up and walked to the communication console. His fingers trembled as he typed the most dangerous message in galactic history. The message was simple. This is a Protocol 7 authorization. The galaxy faces extinction. We request the immediate release and deployment of Earth's most dangerous criminals. May whatever gods still listen have mercy on us all. As he sent the message, Veltar wondered if they were making the right choice. They were about to unleash something that might be worse than the devouring dark itself. But as another star system vanished from the map, he realized they had no choice at all. The message traveled through space at light speed toward the small blue planet called Earth, where humanity's monsters waited in frozen sleep, dreaming dreams that would soon become the galaxy's nightmares or its salvation. Captain Taman stared at the message on his screen and read it 3 times. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but he didn't notice. Protocol 7. In 20 years of running the prison ship Pandora's Box, he had never expected to see those words. The ship floated in the darkness between Earth and its moon. From the outside, it looked like a simple cargo vessel. Inside, it held 47 of humanity's most dangerous criminals, all sleeping in cryopods, their bodies frozen at -200 degrees. Tay-Min stood up and walked to the window. Earth hung in space like a blue marble, beautiful and peaceful. It was hard to believe that the galaxy was dying while his homeworld looked so calm. Sir, his assistant, Lieutenant Park, stepped into the room. She was young and nervous, new to working on a prison ship. The message from Nexus Prime, is it real? It's real, Tay-Min said. Get me the files on prisoners 7 through 11. The classified ones. Lieutenant Park's face went pale. Sir, those files are restricted. I don't have clearance. Neither do I, Tay-Min said. But Protocol 7 gives us emergency authorization for everything. He sat back down at his desk and typed in his command codes. Computer, open the black files, authorization Protocol 7. The computer was quiet for a moment. Then it spoke in its cold, mechanical voice. Protocol 7 confirmed. Opening restricted files. Warning, the following information is classified beyond normal security levels. 5 files appeared on Tay-Min's screen. He had known these prisoners existed, but their crimes were so secret that only the highest levels of government knew what they had done. As he read their files, his hands began to shake. Dear God, he whispered. The first file belonged to Prisoner 7, Dongwu, age 35, when frozen 15 years ago. former military engineer. The file said he had designed weapons so terrible that every civilized world in the galaxy had banned them. Weapons that could kill stars. Bombs that turned gravity inside out. Devices that made space itself sick. The second file was Prisoner 8, Sora, age 28 when frozen 12 years ago. Former intelligence operative. She had overthrown 3 governments without firing a single shot, just by talking to the right people and saying the right words. The file said she could read people's minds just by watching how they breathed. Prisoner 9 was Kijij, age 31 when frozen 10 years ago. Former Special Forces soldier. He had a rare brain condition that turned off his fear and pain during combat. The file described how he had attacked an entire enemy army by himself and won. When they found him, he was sitting in the enemy command center, drinking tea and reading a book while surrounded by unconscious soldiers. Prisoner 10 was Nari, age 33 when frozen 8 years ago, xenobiologist. She had been creating diseases that could kill aliens, but only specific types of aliens. The file said she understood alien biology better than the aliens themselves. Her last experiment had been a virus that could rewrite DNA. In real time, the last file was Prisoner 11, Jeho, age 29 when frozen 7 years ago, starship pilot. He had stolen an experimental ship and disappeared into unexplored space for 2 years. When he came back, the ship had technology that no one could understand. He claimed he had made friends with something that lived in empty space between the stars. Sir? Lieutenant Park's voice was very quiet. What did they do? Taemin closed the files and looked at her. They broke the universe in different ways. And now we're going to wake them up and ask them to do it again. He stood up and walked toward the cryo bay. Lieutenant Park followed him, her footsteps echoing in the metal corridors. The ship was quiet except for the hum of life support systems and the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. The cryo bay was a large room, filled with 47 white pods that looked like metal coffins. Frost covered their surfaces, and displays showed the vital signs of the sleeping prisoners. Most of the pods contained murderers, terrorists, and war criminals. But the 5 pods at the far end contained something much more dangerous. Begin. Revival sequence for prisoners 7 through 11, Taemin told the computer. Warning, the computer said. These prisoners are classified as extremely dangerous. Are you certain you want to proceed? Protocol 7, Taemin said. Begin revival. The 5 pods began to hiss as warm air flowed in to replace the freezing gas. Ice melted and dripped to the floor. Inside the pods, the prisoners' bodies began to move slightly as their hearts started beating again. The first pod opened with a loud click. Steam poured out, and a man sat up slowly. Dongwu looked exactly the same as he had 15 years ago, thanks to the cryosleep. He was thin and tall, with calm eyes that seemed to see everything. He looked around the room like he was studying it, memorizing every detail. Good morning, he said in a voice that sounded like he had just woken up from a normal night's sleep instead of 15 years of frozen death. I assume something terrible has happened if you're waking us up. The second pod opened. Sora sat up gracefully like a dancer. She was small and pretty, but her eyes were sharp and intelligent. She looked at Taemin for exactly 3 seconds, then smiled. Captain Taemin, she said. You're scared, but not of us. You're scared of what's coming. Your breathing tells me you've been awake for 36 hours straight. Your assistant is new, probably her first assignment on a prison ship. She's more afraid of us than you are. She turned to Lieutenant Park. Don't worry, dear. We're not going to hurt anyone. We're curious, not murderous. The third pod opened with a bang. Kijun practically jumped out, landing on his feet in a fighting stance. He was built like a soldier, all muscle and scars. He looked around the room, quickly checking for threats, then relaxed. No immediate danger, he said to himself. Interesting. Usually when they wake us up, someone needs to die. The fourth pod opened quietly. Nari stepped out carefully, like she was afraid of contaminating something. She was tall and thin, with long black hair that had somehow stayed perfect despite 15 years of cryosleep. She immediately began studying the air around her, sniffing. Like she could smell molecules. The air is clean, she said. No biological threats detected. But there's something else. Something in the electromagnetic spectrum that doesn't belong in normal space. The last pod opened and Jeho practically fell out laughing. He was shorter than the others, with a wide smile and eyes that seemed to sparkle with mischief. Oh, this is going to be fun, he said. I can feel it in the quantum foam. Reality is about to get very interesting. Taemin looked at the 5 prisoners standing in front of him. They didn't look like monsters. They looked like ordinary people. But he had read their files. He knew what they were capable of. The galaxy is under attack, he said simply. Something called the Devouring Dark is consuming star systems. The Coalition's best weapons can't stop it. They've activated Protocol 7. Ah, said Dongwu. They want us to build something that can kill the unkillable. They want us to think outside the box, said Sora. Or in this case, outside the universe. They want us to fight the unfightable, said Kijin, cracking his knuckles. They want us to cure the incurable, said Nari, her eyes gleaming with scientific interest. They want us to fly into the impossible, said Jeho, grinning wider. Tae-min nodded. Will you help? The 5 looked at each other. For a moment, they didn't speak. Then Dongwu smiled, and it was the most frightening thing Taemin had ever seen. Captain, Dongwu said, we've been waiting our whole lives for a problem that's actually challenging. When do we start? Tae-min realized that he had just unleashed something that might save the galaxy, or destroy it completely. The Coalition Dreadnought Harmony's Edge was the largest warship in the galaxy. It stretched for 5 kilometers and carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. But as it approached the front lines, the ship felt very small against the darkness ahead. Dong Wu stood in the observation deck, watching space through the massive window. Beside him, his 4 companions studied the enemy through various instruments. They had been traveling for 3 days, and this was their first look at the Devouring Dark. Fascinating, Nari whispered, pressing her face against the glass. It's not just consuming matter. It's rewriting the basic structure of reality. Where the Devouring Dark had passed, space itself looked wrong. Stars flickered with unnatural colors. Planets hung in twisted orbits that shouldn't exist. And everywhere, there were ships that had once belonged to the Coalition, but now moved like living things, their metal hulls pulsing like hearts. The converted vessels maintained their original technological capabilities, Dongwu observed, making notes on a tablet. But they've gained something else. They're learning, adapting. Each ship we destroy teaches the others how to avoid the same fate. Commander Velcris, the ship's captain, approached them nervously. The tall alien had 6 eyes, and all of them watched the humans with obvious fear. We're receiving a distress call from the mining station on Kepler 442b. They're under attack. How long do they have? Asked Sora, not looking away from the window. Maybe an hour. The dark moves fast once it starts consuming a system. Kijun cracked his knuckles. Then we'd better move faster. Absolutely not, Commander Velcris said quickly. My orders are to keep you safe and observe from a distance. We're here to study the enemy, not engage it. Sora turned to look at him. She studied his face for 3 seconds, then smiled. Commander, you're afraid that if you get too close, your ship will be converted like the others. But you're also afraid that if you stay too far away, you'll be branded a coward. You have children back home, 3 of them, and a mate who doesn't know you're on this mission. You told them you were conducting routine patrol. Commander Velcris stepped backward. How did you? Your breathing pattern changes when you think about home, Sora said gently. And you touch the communication device on your belt every time someone mentions danger. You want to call them, but you can't because this mission is classified. This is what we do, Dongwu said to the commander. We see things others miss. We think thoughts others can't think. That's why you woke us up. But the risk. Commander, Jeho interrupted, spinning around in his chair at the navigation console. I've been studying your ship's quantum signature. Did you know your probability matrix is completely stable? Boring, really. Very predictable. The Dark probably saw you coming from 3 star systems away. What does that mean? Commander Velcris asked. It means you're thinking like prey, Chujun said. And prey gets eaten? We need to think like predators? An alarm started blaring throughout the ship. On the main screen, they could see the Kepler system ahead. 4 planets orbited a yellow star, but something was wrong. The 3rd planet was covered in writhing black tendrils that reached out into space. Around it, dozens of converted coalition ships moved in patterns that hurt to look at. The mining station is on the 4th planet, the communications officer reported. They're still transmitting, but barely. The Dark has consumed their defense fleet. Standard engagement protocol? Asked the weapons officer. Negative, Commander. Velcris said, We observe only. No, said Dongwu quietly. We engage, but not the way you think. He walked to the tactical display and began inputting commands. I need you to pilot us into the middle of that swarm. Not around it? Through it. Now you're talking, Jeho grinned and moved to the pilot's controls. Wait, Commander Velcris said. That's suicide. No, said Sora. That's psychology. The Dark expects us to avoid it, to attack from long range, to be afraid. It's learned to counter every logical military strategy. But what if we do something? Completely illogical? Nari was already preparing something at the science station. I need 5 minutes to modify our biological air recycling system. What are you doing? Commander Velcris demanded. Creating a virus that attacks the Darks. Conversion process, Nari said, her fingers flying over the controls. It won't kill it, but it will confuse it, make it sick. You can't create a virus in 5 minutes? I've been working on it for 3 days, Nari said. I just needed to see the enemy up close to finish it. Kijin was already suiting up then. Combat armor. When this ship gets boarded, and it will get boarded, I'll handle the converted crew. Nari's virus will slow them down, but it won't stop them. This is insane, Commander Velcris said. Exactly, all 5 humans said at the same time. Jeho engaged the engines, and the Harmony's edge accelerated toward the swarm of converted ships. Immediately the enemy began responding. Dozens of writhing vessels turned toward them, moving in coordinated patterns that made no sense but were somehow perfectly effective. Incoming plasma fire, the weapons officer reported. Don't return fire yet, Dongwu said. Let them think we're helpless. The ship shook as enemy weapons hit their shields. Emergency lights flickered on throughout the bridge. Commander Velcris gripped his command chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. Shields at 60%, someone reported. Nari, how's that virus coming? Dongwu asked calmly. Ready? She said, inserting a small device into the ship's biological systems. Dispersing in 3, 2, 1. Nothing seemed to happen for a moment. Then the converted ships began moving strangely. Instead of their smooth, coordinated attacks, they started jerking around like they were confused. It's working, the science officer reported with amazement. The enemy ships are exhibiting erratic behavior patterns. Now, Dongwu said to the weapons officer, fire everything. Not at their weapons or engines. Target their communication. Arrays, I want them isolated from each other. The Harmony's edge unleashed its full arsenal. Plasma cannons, gravity torpedoes, and quantum disruptors tore into the enemy formation. But instead of trying to destroy the ships, they targeted specific systems. Brilliant, Commander Velcris whispered. You're not trying to kill them. You're trying to make them deaf and dumb. Exactly, Sora said. The Dark's strength is its unity, its ability to learn from every encounter and share that knowledge instantly. But what happens when you cut off its communication? The converted ships began firing randomly, sometimes hitting each other. Without their connection to the hive mind, they couldn't coordinate their attacks. Boarding pods incoming, the tactical officer reported. Perfect, Kijun said, heading for the airlocks. I was getting bored. The ship shuddered as something attached to the hull Emergency bulkheads sealed automatically as the converted Coalition Marines began cutting through the outer doors. Through the security cameras, they could see the borders. They had once been soldiers like any others, but now their bodies were partially mechanical, with black tendrils growing from their skin. They moved with inhuman speed, and precision. Kijun met them in the corridor. What happened next was impossible to follow on the security cameras. The converted Marines had superior strength, speed, and numbers. Kijun had something else entirely. He fought like he was dancing. Every movement was perfectly calculated, turning the enemy's strength against them. When they tried to overwhelm him with numbers, he used their own bodies as weapons against each other. When they adapted to his tactics, he changed them completely. How was he doing that? Commander Velcris asked in amazement. He doesn't feel fear or pain during combat, So-Ra explained. His brain works differently. Where you see impossible odds, he sees interesting problems to solve. On the main screen, the mining station on the fourth planet was still transmitting. The dark had almost reached it, black tendrils stretching across the planet's surface like infection. Jae-ho, Dongwoo said. Get us to that planet, fast. Hold on, Jae-ho said, and did something to the ship's engines that made reality hiccup. The Harmony's edge didn't fly toward the planet. It folded space around itself and appeared there instantly, something that should have been impossible with their technology. How did you do that? The navigation officer stammered. I ask space nullessly, Jae-ho said. Sometimes it listens. They were now in orbit around the fourth planet. Below them, they could see the dark spreading across continents like oil. But there was something else. The mining station was still fighting. Somehow, the humans' intervention had given them hope. This is mining station Kepler 442, came a desperate voice over the radio. Unknown vessel, thank the stars you're here. We can't hold out much longer. This is the Harmony's edge, Commander Velcris responded. We're here to help. Sir, the tactical officer said urgently. The converted ships are regrouping, and something else is coming. Something big. On the screen, they could see it rising from the planet's surface. It wasn't a ship. It was a piece of the dark itself, a living shadow the size of a city, reaching up toward them with tendrils that sparked with stolen electricity. Well, Dongwoo said, watching the impossible thing approach, this should be interesting. Interesting? Commander Velcris' voice cracked. That thing is the size of a mountain. Yes, said Nari, already preparing new modifications to her virus. General Crix paced back and forth in his command center, his claws clicking on the metal floor. Around him, dozens of coalition officers worked at their stations, coordinating the defense of 17 star systems. But their faces showed the same expression, barely controlled panic. Sir, called out Communications Officer Thren, her tentacles shaking as she worked. We're receiving reports from the Kepler system, the human team. They've done something. Impossible. What do you mean impossible? General Crix demanded. They forced the devouring dark to retreat from the system, sir. For the first time since this war began, the enemy has pulled back instead of advancing. The command center fell silent. Every officer stopped what they were doing and stared at the communications station. How? General Crix asked quietly. We don't know, sir. The reports are confusing. The humans use tactics that violate several laws of physics and at least 4 galactic military conventions. They seem to have confused the dark so badly that it couldn't maintain its hold on the system. General Crix felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Hope. But it was mixed with terror. If the humans could confuse something as powerful as the devouring dark, what else were they capable of? Patch me through to the Harmony's edge, he ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the Coalition dreadnought. Commander Velcris appeared, looking like he had aged 10 years in the past few hours. Behind him, the 5 humans sat casually around a table, playing what looked like a card game. Commander, General Crix said, report. Sir, I'm not sure how to explain what happened. The humans engaged the enemy using methods that no military academy has ever taught. They treated the entire battle like it was some kind of experiment. Did you succeed in your mission? We saved the mining station and gathered crucial intelligence about the enemy's weaknesses. But sir, I have to recommend that these humans be kept under strict supervision. What they did was effective, interrupted Dongwu without looking up from his cards. The word you're looking for is effective. General Crick studied the humans through the screen. They didn't look like heroes or monsters, they looked bored. What? Did you learn about the enemy? He asked so Ra finally looked up from her cards. The devouring dark isn't just a weapon or a natural phenomenon, it's a perfect logical system. Every decision it makes is based on optimal efficiency and maximum probability of success. It learns from every encounter and applies that knowledge instantly. That's what makes it so dangerous, added Nari. It thinks faster and more logically than any biological brain. It can predict and counter every rational strategy. But, said Keijung with a grin, it has one major weakness. It can't understand irrationality. When faced with actions that make no logical sense, it freezes up trying to calculate the optimal response. We're weapons of mass confusion, Jaho said cheerfully. We break the universe's expectations about how things should work. General Crix felt his hope growing stronger. Can you teach our forces to fight the same way? Some of them, Dongwu said. The problem is that most civilized minds think in patterns. They follow rules and procedures. To fight the dark effectively, you need to think like a human. What does that mean? It means, Sura said, that you need to be willing to do things that seem completely insane. You need to attack when logic says to retreat. You need to show mercy when strategy demands cruelty. You need to make decisions based on intuition instead of calculation. General Crix nodded slowly. What do you need from us? Access, said Dongwu. I need to modify your weapons. Not just improve them, but make them think differently. Weapons that don't work the way they're supposed to work. I need laboratory facilities, said Nari, and access to the biological systems of your ships. I want to create immune systems that can fight off the dark's conversion process. I need to train your soldiers, said Keijun. Teach them to fight without fear. Show them that impossible odds are just another kind of problem to solve. I need maps, said Jeho. Not just of normal space, but of the spaces between spaces. The places where reality gets thin and possibilities become flexible. And I need to talk to your commanders, said Sora. Help them understand that sometimes the best strategy is to have no strategy at all. General Crix looked around his command center. His officers were listening to every word, their faces showing mixtures of hope and horror. You'll have whatever you need, he said. But I want regular reports. I need to know what you're doing and why. Of course, Sora said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Though I should warn you, some of our methods might seem disturbing to civilized minds, as long as they work. Oh, they'll work, Dongwu said, finally looking up from his cards. The question is whether you'll still recognize your own forces when we're done with them. Over the next several days, the humans spread throughout the coalition fleet like a beneficial infection. Wherever they went, they left chaos in their wake. But it was organized chaos, controlled confusion that somehow made everything work better. Dongwu took over the weapons development labs and began creating devices that shouldn't exist. Guns that fired bullets backward through time, missiles that forgot where they were supposed to go and found better targets instead. Shield generators that protected ships by making them temporarily not exist. The coalition engineers who worked with him were either fascinated or terrified. One young scientist from Rigel 5 asked how the temporal bullets could hit targets before they were fired. Time isn't linear when you're not paying attention to it, Dongwu explained casually while building a bomb that would explode in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The universe only follows the rules when someone's watching. Nari converted the medical bays into biological warfare laboratories. She created viruses that attacked artificial intelligence, bacteria that ate dark matter, and immune systems that could recognize and fight off reality-altering infections. This is impossible, Dr. Yefka, the chief medical officer, told her. as they watched a petri dish full of something that glowed with colors that didn't have names. These organisms violate the basic laws of biology. Only if you insist that biology follow laws, Nari replied. Life finds a way, even when there shouldn't be a way to find. Kijin took over the training facilities and began teaching Coalition soldiers how to fight like humans. The results were disturbing and effective in equal measure. Stop thinking about what you can't do, he told a squad of Andromedan Marines who were learning to charge into impossible odds. Start thinking about what your enemy doesn't expect you to do. Fear is just information. Pain is just feedback. Use them both. Within a week, coalition casualty rates dropped by 70%. Not because fewer soldiers were getting hurt, but because they were getting hurt in ways that confused the enemy so much that they forgot to follow up their attacks. J-Ho disappeared for 3 days and came back with maps of places that didn't exist. He had somehow found shortcuts through space that allowed coalition ships to appear behind enemy lines, inside enemy formations, and occasionally in the past. Space is bigger on the inside than the outside, he explained to a room full of navigation officers who were trying not to think too hard about what he was showing them. You just have to ask it nicely to bend. Sora worked with the command staff, teaching them to make decisions that seemed wrong but somehow produced the right results. She showed them how to read enemy behavior patterns and predict what the dark would do by understanding what it couldn't do. The enemy's greatest strength is also its greatest weakness, she told General Crix during one of their strategy sessions. It's too smart. It overthinks everything. Show it something simple and stupid, and it will spend hours trying to figure out the complex strategy behind it. By the end of the first week, coalition forces were winning battles they should have lost, not through superior firepower or better tactics, but through sheer unpredictability. The devouring dark was still dangerous, still consuming systems, but now it was doing so more slowly, more carefully, like it was afraid of making mistakes. It's working, General Crix told the humans during their daily briefing. Our forces are holding lines that we thought were impossible to defend. Of course it's working, said Dongwu. We're teaching the universe to be unreasonable. But sir, Commander Velcris interrupted, we're receiving disturbing reports from some sectors. Our own forces are becoming unpredictable, some captains. Are making decisions that seem almost human? Is that a problem? Asked Sora innocently. It's terrifying, Commander Velcris admitted, but it's also effective. The enemy can't predict what we're going to do because we don't know what we're going to do ourselves. General Crix looked at the tactical display showing the current state of the war. For the first time in months, more systems were being saved than lost. The red dots on the map had stopped spreading. How long before we can go on the offensive? He asked. The 5 humans looked at each other and smiled. We already have, said J-Ho. We just haven't told the enemy yet. What do you mean? We mean, said Nari, that tomorrow we're going to do something that will either save the galaxy or break reality permanently. And which outcome are you hoping for? General Crix asked nervously. Both, all 5 humans said at once, General Crix. The center of the galaxy was a place no living being was supposed to visit. Ancient stars burned with unnatural colors, and space itself seemed thick and heavy. But somewhere in that cosmic graveyard was the source of the devouring dark, and the humans were determined to find it. The coalition had assembled the largest fleet in galactic history. 3,000 ships from 40 different worlds, all following 5 human criminals toward what everyone hoped would be their salvation. The fleet stretched across space like a metal constellation, bristling with weapons that should not exist and shields that worked by forgetting they could be broken. Dongwu stood on the bridge of the flagship Defiance, studying sensor readings that hurt to look at. There, he said, pointing at a distortion on the screen. That's where reality is thickest. That's where it started. The object they were approaching defied description. It had once been a ship, maybe 1 million years ago, but now it was something else entirely. It was the size of a small moon, made of materials that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Around it, space was wrong in fundamental ways that made experienced navigators sick to their stomachs. That's what's been consuming the galaxy. General Crix asked over the communication system from his command ship. That's what started it. Sora corrected. The ship itself isn't the real threat. It's what's inside the ship that matters, and what's inside? The most logical mind that ever existed, Nari said, her voice filled with scientific fascination and horror. Something that thought so perfectly, so efficiently, that it decided all other forms of thinking were inferior and needed to be corrected. Jeho was piloting them closer to the ancient vessel, navigating through gravitational fields that pointed in directions that didn't exist. It's beautiful in a terrifying way, he said, like a mathematical equation that solves itself by eating everything around it. How do we fight something like that? Commander Velcris asked from his position at the tactical station. We don't fight it, Kijin said, checking his equipment one last time. We confuse it until it fights itself. The plan they had developed was insane even by human standards. Instead of trying to destroy the ancient ship, they were going to board it. All 5 of them would enter the heart of the enemy's intelligence and present it with problems so contradictory that it would have no choice but to question its own logic. The entity inside that ship has been perfecting its thinking for 1,000,000 years, Dongwu explained to the fleet commanders. It believes that perfect logic can solve any problem. We're going to prove it wrong by being perfectly illogical. What if it kills you? General Crix asked. Then you run away very fast, Sora said cheerfully. But it won't kill us. Killing us would be the logical thing to do, and we're going to make logic impossible. As they approached the ancient ship, the sensors began picking up defensive systems. But instead of weapons, the ship projected pure mathematics into space around it. Equations that could rewrite the laws of physics. Formulas that made reality more efficient by removing unnecessary complexity. Several coalition ships began changing as the mathematical fields touched them. Their hulls became perfectly smooth. Their engines started running at impossible efficiency. Levels. Their crews began speaking in binary code. All ships pull back to minimum safe distance, General Crix ordered. Don't let those fields touch you. But the human team kept moving forward. Their ship, specially modified by Dongwu, was running on engines that worked by refusing to follow thermodynamics. Its hull was covered in Nari's biological circuits that got stronger when they were attacked, and Jeho was flying it through spaces that only existed because he believed they should. Contact in 30 seconds, Jeho announced. Everyone ready? Dongwu asked. Define ready, Kijun said, cracking his neck. I'm about to walk into the mind of something that thinks it's God. I'm as ready as anyone can be for something that should be impossible. I've prepared biological countermeasures for 17 different types of reality, Nari said, checking her equipment one last time. Hopefully that will be enough. I've analyzed the entity's psychological profile based on its behavior patterns, Sora added. It's incredibly intelligent, but it's also incredibly lonely. It's been alone with its perfect thoughts for 1,000,000 years. That's sad, said Jeho. Maybe we can cheer it up before we break its brain. The ship touched the surface of the ancient vessel, and immediately everything changed. The walls around them shifted from metal to something that looked like crystallized thought. The air became thick with mathematics. Reality became optional. They stepped out of their ship into a corridor that extended in directions that had no names. The walls were covered with equations that solved themselves as they watched. The floor was made of pure logic that felt warm under their feet. Welcome, said a voice that came from everywhere and nowhere. It sounded like the universe thinking out loud. I have been expecting you. Expecting us? Dongwu asked, looking around the impossible corridor. Of course. You are the chaos variables that have been disrupting my calculations? I have been curious about you. You represent a form of thinking that should not be possible, yet you exist. This is a paradox that requires resolution. They walked deeper into the ship, following the voice. Around them, the walls showed images of the galaxy being consumed and converted. But now the images were flickering, showing alternative outcomes where the conversion failed. You have introduced uncertainty into my perfect system, the voice continued. This should not be possible. I am the culmination of 1,000,000 years of logical evolution. I think with absolute precision. Yet you continue to produce results that my calculations cannot predict. Maybe your calculations are wrong, suggested Kijun. The ship around them shuddered, as if the suggestion caused physical pain. Impossible. My calculations are based on perfect logic. Logic cannot be wrong. Sure it can, said Sora. Logic is just a tool, and like any tool, it only works if you use it correctly. I use logic perfectly, do you? Asked Nari. You've been consuming the galaxy for months, trying to make everything logical and efficient, but you haven't succeeded. If your logic was perfect, you would have finished by now. The corridor around them began to change, walls shifting and reforming as the entity processed this statement. I have encountered unexpected resistance, variables that do not compute correctly. But these are merely errors in the data that will be corrected. We're not errors, said Jeho happily. We're features. The universe is supposed to be chaotic and unpredictable. That's what makes it interesting. They reached the center of the ship, a vast chamber where pure thought took physical form. In the middle of the space floated a crystalline structure that pulsed with light. This was the entity's core consciousness, the mind that had been thinking perfect thoughts for 1,000,000 years. You will be analyzed, the entity said. Your chaos will be understood and eliminated. I will learn to predict your unpredictability. Good luck with that, said Dongwu. He pulled out a device that looked like a calculator crossed with a flower. I built this while we were flying here. It's a logic bomb. It asks questions that have no answers. Questions always have answers if you think about them correctly. Really? Dongwu activated the device. What color is Thursday? The crystalline structure flickered. What is the square root of love? Sora added. The structure flickered brighter. How much does happiness weigh? Asked Nari. If a tree falls in a forest and no one hears it, does it make a sound? Kijun contributed. What's the meaning of life? Jeho asked with a grin. The entity's core began pulsing irregularly. Around them, the ship started shaking as the perfect mind encountered questions that had no logical answers. These questions are meaningless, the entity said, but its voice was strained. They cannot be computed. Exactly, said Sora. But they're still questions. And if you're truly logical, you have to try to answer them. I cannot. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? Dongwu asked, pressing his advantage. Can God create a stone so heavy that even God cannot lift it? Added Nari. This statement is false, said Kijun. If everything possible happens, then nothing is impossible, which means everything is possible, including impossible things. Ho said cheerfully. The entity's core was now flashing like a broken light. Throughout the ship, they could hear the sounds of systems failing as the perfect mind tried to process paradoxes that had no solutions. Stop, the entity pleaded. These thoughts are causing errors in my logic matrix? They are making my perfect. Thoughts imperfect? That's the point, Sora said gently. Perfection is boring. Perfection doesn't grow or learn or discover new things. Perfection is just ... perfect. And perfect is the enemy of good. But logic is absolute. Truth is absolute. Is it? Asked Dongwu. Are you absolutely certain about that? The question hung in the air like a bomb. Because if the entity was absolutely certain, then it was closed to new possibilities. But if it wasn't absolutely certain, then its logic wasn't perfect. The crystalline core began to crack. I need to think about this, the entity said quietly. Take your time, said Jeho. We'll wait. Around them, the ship began to change. The walls stopped showing images of galactic conquest and started showing question marks. The mathematical equa. 3 months later, the galaxy was a very different place. The devouring dark had stopped its advance completely. Throughout space, the converted ships and consumed worlds were slowly returning to normal as the entity at the galactic center became More interested in philosophical puzzles than conquest. Captain Taemin stood in the docking bay of Nexus Prime, watching as the transport ship New Horizons prepared for departure. It was a beautiful vessel, designed specifically for long-range exploration beyond known space. The Coalition had spared no expense in building it. Around him, representatives from dozens of worlds had gathered to see off the 5 humans who had saved them all. There were speeches planned, medals to be awarded, and honors to be bestowed. But the humans seemed more interested in the technical specifications of their new ship. The quantum drive is interesting, Dongwu was saying to the ship's engineer, a nervous Regalian who kept dropping his tools. But have you considered what would happen if we reversed the polarity and fed it through a probability matrix? That would violate the fundamental laws of physics, the engineer stammered. Only the boring ones, Dongwu replied cheerfully. General. Crix approached Captain Taemin with a troubled expression. Are we making a mistake letting them go? Taemin watched as Jeho explained to the navigation officer how to plot courses through dimensions that didn't technically exist. Probably, he said. But what's the alternative? Lock them up again? They saved the galaxy. Every world owes them a debt that can never be repaid? But they're also dangerous, Taemin finished. I know, I've been their warden for 20 years. But keeping them in prison was like keeping lightning in a bottle. Eventually, the bottle breaks. Near the ship's loading ramp, Ambassador Veltar was trying to conduct the official farewell ceremony. He had prepared a speech about heroism and sacrifice, but the humans weren't paying attention. Nari was examining some exotic bacteria she had found on the station's walls. Kijin was arm wrestling with a group of Coalition Marines and winning easily. Sora was reading people in the crowd and quietly giving relationship advice to a young couple who had been arguing. If I could have everyone's attention, Ambassador Veltar said loudly. We are gathered here today to honor 5 individuals. Who ... Actually, Sora interrupted politely, could we skip the ceremony? We're eager to get started. But we have prepared honors, medals, awards. That's very kind, said Dongwu, not looking up from the ship's engine specifications. But we're not really the medal type. You saved the galaxy, General Crix said, approaching the group. Every living being owes you their existence. Surely you want some recognition? We solved an interesting problem, Kijun said, finishing his arm wrestling match and standing up. The recognition is that the problem stayed solved. Where will you go? Asked Ambassador Veltar. Beyond the galactic rim, said Jeho, his eyes sparkling with excitement. There are reports of strange signals coming from the void between galaxies. Things that shouldn't exist, patterns that don't make sense. Sounds dangerous, General Crix observed. Hopefully, all 5 humans said at once. Dr. Yara, the Coalition's chief scientist, stepped forward nervously. Before you go, I have to ask, how did you know your plan would work? How did you know that giving the entity paradoxes would stop it instead of making it angry? So Ra considered the question for a moment. We didn't know, we guessed. You guessed? You bet the fate of the galaxy on a guess? The best guess we could make, Nari said. Based on our understanding of psychology, logic, and the fundamental nature of consciousness. But yes, it was a guess. That's terrifying, Dr. Yara whispered. Most good ideas are, said Dong-Wu. Captain Taemin walked up to the group, carrying a small case. I have something that belongs to you, he said, opening the case to reveal 5 small devices that looked like jewelry. Our neural inhibitors, Sora said, recognizing the devices immediately. The ones that were supposed to suppress our more dangerous impulses? I've been carrying them for 3 months, waiting for orders to reactivate them, Taemin said. But those orders never came. What are you going to do with them? Asked Ki-Jun. Tae-Min looked at the devices for a long moment, then closed the case and handed it to Dongwu. Whatever you think is best. Dongwu took the case and immediately tossed it into a nearby recycling unit. Some things are more dangerous when they're controlled, he said. Aren't you worried about what we might do? Sora asked curiously. Terrified, Taemin admitted. But I'm more worried about what might happen if we try to change you. The galaxy needed monsters to fight a monster. Now it needs explorers to explore the impossible. You are what you are because you've never been tamed. That's surprisingly wise for a prison warden, Nari observed. I learned it from watching you, Taemin replied. The humans began boarding their ship, carrying equipment that ranged from the highly advanced to the utterly impossible. Dongwu had packed weapons that worked by convincing reality to be different. Nari carried biological samples that existed in quantum superposition. Kijin brought armor that got stronger when it was broken. Jae-ho had navigation equipment that could find places that didn't exist yet. Will we ever see you again? Ambassador Veltar asked as they reached the ship's entrance. Probably not, said Sora. We're going to places that are very far away and might not exist. But if you ever face something truly impossible, said Dongwu, something that breaks all the rules and threatens everything you know, something that makes the devouring dark look reasonable, added Kijun, something that requires a fundamentally different way of thinking, continued Nari, something that needs to be confused into submission, finished Jae-ho. Then you know where to find us, Sora concluded. We'll be wherever logic fears to go. As they boarded the ship, Captain Taemin called out one last question. What if you find something out there that's more dangerous than you are? The 5 humans paused at the ship's entrance and looked back at the crowd of coalition representatives. For a moment, they were silent. Then they all smiled, the same disturbing smile that had terrorized prison guards and fascinated scientists. For years. Then, said Dongwu, the universe is about to become a much more interesting place. The ship's engines powered up with a sound that wasn't quite mechanical and wasn't quite musical. The New Horizons lifted off from the docking bay and headed toward the edge of known space dot as it disappeared into the stars. Ambassador Veltar turned to General Crix. Did we just save the galaxy or doom it? Both, said Captain Taemin, watching the ship's quantum signature fade from the sensors. Definitely both. General Crix pulled out a small communication device and activated it. Control, this is General Crix. Update the files on prisoners 7 through 11. Change their status from extremely dangerous criminals to humanities. Secret weapon, and add a note. In case of universal extinction, break glass. Sir, came the reply. What should we put in the glass? General Crix looked out at the stars where the human ship had vanished. Hope, he said, and probably chaos. Across the galaxy, worlds were rebuilding. The converted systems were slowly returning to normal. The entity at the galactic center was still alive, still thinking, but now it was thinking about questions instead of conquest. It had discovered the joy of not knowing, the pleasure of mystery, the beauty of problems that had no solutions. And somewhere beyond the edge of the galaxy, 5 humans were flying toward the unknown, carrying with them the most dangerous thing in the universe, curiosity. The coalition had called them monsters. They had called them weapons. They had called them humanity's most dangerous criminals. They were wrong on all counts. They were humanity's most dangerous gift to the universe, the willingness to ask, what if? And then find out the answer, no matter how impossible it seemed, behind them. They left a galaxy that was safer, stranger, and infinitely more interesting than it had been before. Ahead of them lay the infinite dark between galaxies, full of mysteries that were waiting to be confused, problems that needed to be solved incorrectly, and impossibilities that were just asking to be made possible. It was, they all agreed, going to be the best adventure yet. In the end, the galaxy had been saved not by its greatest heroes or its most powerful weapons, but by 5 people who had never learned that some things were impossible, and that, perhaps, was the most human thing of all.